Hello, welcome to our last of our series of FraudWatch presentations. And we've already had 2 weeks ago, we had a postal inspector telling us about mail fraud. And last week we did cognitive issues related to fraud. And today we're going to talk about psychological tricks that fraudsters use to reel in their victims. And I'm delighted that we have Helen Savage with us today. And Helen's whole professional career has been revolving around consumer protection. So she's got lots of experience and lots of stories. And she did work for AARP for quite a few years. And and she's still volunteering with them. So she's got a lot of good things. So we're going to kind of have a conversation today. So every once in a while I'll pop in with a little something. But I'm delighted she's here. And welcome, Helen.
Thank you.
And our goal today is to talk about the scam artists and how they get their victims to listen to their spiel and buy into it. And we call that getting victims into the ether. Sort of like ether in surgeries. Helen, tell us about ether.
Well, what that really means is the goal is to get people to the point where they're not thinking critically, they're not applying their analytical skills, they're not taking a deep breath and saying, this really doesn't make sense. So so when scammers try to get you into the ether, they want you to not really analyze or evaluate or think critically about what they're saying. They just want you to be in an emotional state.
Okay, so they kind of mesmerize you. Well, tell us some examples of this, because I'm sure there's lots.
Oh, there's lots. The two primary emotions that scammers try to tap into is to either get you anxious or afraid, or to build trust with you. And so an example that lots of people are getting are phone calls that say they're from the Social Security Administration. And the voice sounds ominous, and it will tell you that your Social Security number has been found in as a result of some illegal activity. And sometimes the scenario is your Social Security number has been found in a car that's been involved in drug trafficking, and the car was shot up and there was blood in it, and your Social Security number was right there. And there is now going to be an action to freeze the assets in your bank account because of this illegal activity, and a federal marshal is going to come to your door with a warrant for your arrest, and dire things are going to happen to you. And
that's a real life example, right? Of
absolutely. And then the thing that I really so scratch my head over, why do people fall for this? I mean, I know that they fall for it because it sounds so ominous and they're afraid. And the thought of having your bank account frozen, the thought that you will not have, access to any of your resources is a terrible thought for people. But yes, this actually does happen. And the reason that I know this happens is that I volunteer on AARP's FraudWatch network. And that means that I return phone calls from consumers that have called and have a consumer problem, or they want to check out, is this a scam or is this for real? And I've probably heard this scenario at least 15 different times. And it's the same. Generally the same, parameters for it. And the fix that the scammer offers is, if you go out and buy gift cards and then contact me and provide the information, we can stop this from happening.
So the federal marshal won't show up and arrest you and all of that. So that's one of the scary things. And I know there's other kinds of extortion where they threaten to put, information about you on that's pornographic or whatever, and they're going to tell your church and your synagogue or temple, and they're going to, so that gets panic, fear. Now, what about the other side? You talked about trust.
Well, trust, and the trust factor, a lot of the times we see the scams related to trust come up in terms of people visiting dating sites. People are looking for romance, they're looking for a relationship. They post a profile about themselves, they start getting contacted. Then one of the tip-offs is that the person wants to go offline, off the dating site, to talk with them, to converse with them, to build their relationship. And so this could go on for a short time or for a long time, but the scammer is getting to know somebody and getting to know a lot about it. And then the person who's looking for love in their life, um, really wants to believe that this could be the person and that they could have a future life with this person. And then the thing that goes awry with that is when the love of your life starts having impediments for being together. So here are some clues that this is not a for real relationship. So lots of times the scenario is I'm working out of the country, or I'm in the military. So those are two clues. But then the other thing, when the person wants to take you offline, off the dating site for private conversations, then they usually start asking you for money. Like, well, we could be together if you would provide money for my plane ticket. We could be together if you will wire a security deposit for an apartment. We could be together if you could just help me out of this family emergency that I'm in. So the tip off is when the love of your life starts asking for money so that then they can take care of this problem and then they can be together. And for the person who is in the midst of this, they send the money and then they don't hear from the person again.
Or maybe they get asked for more money.
Or they get asked for more money. Yes.
So Helen, how prevalent is that romance scam? How much, is that a big deal? Or mainly these, people meet up on these sites and it really works out okay?
Actually, the romance scams, according to the Federal Trade Commission, it's one of their most prevalent scams. They identify that $84 million has been lost to romance scams, and that's through just one reporting site that is calculating the consumer loss for that.
And that's in 1 year?
In 1 year, yes.
$84 million.
Yeah, and there really has been a big increase in romance scams
during COVID, when I think probably, COVID's a pandemic and fraud is an epidemic. Well, there's something else called affinity fraud. What is that about?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that. Affinity fraud is when a scammer really is trying to appeal to people in specific groups. Maybe they are racially the same, religiously the same, professionally the same. They live in the same area, or maybe they're the same gender. But affinity fraud is building relationships within certain communities. Lots of times affinity fraud is around investments. And so it's trying to get a group of people to invest a certain way. in a fund. Usually it's an unregulated fund. And one of the prime examples that I'm sure that we have all heard about is Bernie Madoff when he was having his investment company, and it basically was a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme, and that means that the people who are investing now, their money is being used to pay returns on the people who for the people who invested early, and eventually the resources just run dry, and that is pretty common. But Affinity, the concern there is when a person is really trying to connect with you because you have certain characteristics.
So, for example, you mentioned a church, so they would get some of the trusted members of the church or the clergy to do this, and then people would tell people, "Oh, here's a really good," and
Yes.
so forth. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and especially in a church, I mean, people are inclined to trust their church leaders to believe that they have their best interest at heart. And lots of times the church leaders are duped as well. But it's,
yeah,
oftentimes the returns that are promised from these are, phenomenal. And it's, like it's tapping into your emotion of wanting to trust people and the connection that you have with a place that is safe for you.
yeah. Going back to the romance scams for a sec, you said it's a relationship of trust, but it's also of hopes and dreams. You think, oh,
Absolutely.
and another one, I got this from a friend who received it, and I know nobody can see it really, but it's a very colorful letter, and it's related to a sweepstakes scam from Spain. And a lot of these sweepstakes and lottery scams come from out of the country, although now the scammers have figured out a way to do them, send it to somebody within the country. But in this case, the person was going to have a lump sum payment of $4,500,000 in US dollars. And they're supposed to come to Madrid to collect the money. And meanwhile, it's deposited in a bank in their name, but you're supposed to keep these winnings confidential. Don't tell anybody. But if you can't come to Madrid to get the money, you contact this claim agent immediately, and it happens to be Reverend Miguel Angel, the Foreign Service manager of the Diamond Trust Security and Finance and so forth. So, so then they start reeling you in, saying you need to pay these taxes and these transportation costs and on and on and on. So sweepstakes and lotteries are another one that gets your hopes and dreams up, because who couldn't use $4,500,000? It's
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah, and actually, we see a lot of things about sweepstakes and lotteries and winning prizes and whatnot, especially when times are tough economically, either because of people have real economic needs, or maybe it's greed, but when people are very hyper focused on their finances, some of these things can sound really good. I was talking to a caller from on the FraudWatch network who had lost $59 to a scammer, so she called to report it. And so the scenario there was that someone called her. She lives in an inner city neighborhood, not a very affluent neighborhood. And they said, "Well, we're just calling people in your neighborhood. who because we know people are struggling financially, and we're just calling to offer you economic, financial help. And but the thing that you need to do is you need to send us $59 so that we can get your account for helping you set up. And this lady believed what was being offered. And so when times are tough, lots of times these offers sound good. And the other thing that is kind of related, that not on such a big scale of like the 4 point whatever million from the Spanish lottery, are the opportunities that are out there when you're in a store or when you're at a meeting or whatnot, and people are saying, hey, you can enter this drawing. You can put your name in here, you can win a gym membership, you can win a whatever, you can win something. And people think, well, I want to win something. And so they put their name in the fishbowl, or they put their name in the, whatever. And my advice to consumers on that would be, if you don't know that organization, if you're in the pet store and you're buying cat food and there's a fishbowl at the checkout and you can enter for a drawing of whatever, you don't know who's going to see your information. Don't do it. It is, be careful of how widely you're circulating information about yourself.
Yeah. One of the things I'm picking up, Helen, is you referred to calling people because you're part of the FraudWatch network, and we
Yes.
want to be sure people know the value of the AARP FraudWatch network, that you don't need to be a member of AARP. Um, if you sign up, you get two emails or text messages a month about relevant fraud. And then if you report a fraud, then people like Helen will often talk to you, call you. So there's a lot of personal interaction. And somewhere I heard they had last year 72,000. Is that what was that? 72,000 calls?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
get about between 450 and 500 calls a day, and they're from all over the country. And so lots of times what we're doing on the Fraud Watch Network is advising people, especially if they have fallen, if they have gotten caught up, or they have been victimized by a scam, and they have bought the gift cards, or they've sent the money, or whatever they've done. We advise them on things that they can do to prevent future loss of their identity, of illegal access to their bank accounts, to things like that. So there are very specific steps that someone can take if they have given their social security number to a scammer, if they have given over their computer in response to a pop-up notice that your computer's infected. There are very specific things people can do to prevent future loss and to protect themselves. And so that's what we advise people on.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems is people don't report because they're embarrassed, or they think their family will find out and be mad at them, and reporting is one of the key things to help stop the scammers. So everybody from the FBI to the State's Attorney General, there are just many, many places to report. And if we don't report, as one person, I think it was the postal inspector, said, if you don't report, it never happened, because how do we know? Well, let's go back to some more of these kinds of.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight one scam that one consumer that I talked to recently, and his situation was just so distressing for me. And I hear this a lot, and it's called the Grandparent Scam. And what this indicates is when scammers are able to get you all riled up, all worried, all frantic about someone that you love deeply. um, people do not think critically or evaluatively about what they're doing. So I was talking to this gentleman. He and his wife were called. They said it sounded just like their grandson, who's a young adult, who said, "I'm in New York City. I've been in an accident. I caused the accident. I'm in jail. Can you help? Can you help me with bail?" Um, and the grandson is upset and he's worried. And the grandparent the next day goes to his bank and takes out $9,500 in cash and overnight delivers it the to the person who called him to get his son out of jail. So, and in this case, and lots of times in the grandparent scam, when the money is out of your bank account, whether you bought gift cards or whether you, like in this case, the gentleman got cash out and sent cash to somebody, when it's gone out of your bank account, it's gone. The opportunity, the likelihood that that will ever be recovered is very, very, very small. So, but again, I highlight that case because it's a good demonstration of how when we're worried about somebody who is important to us, we are not necessarily thinking clearly. So, if you get that kind of call, the advice is number one, check with your grandchild directly, call their cell number or another relative, call your child, call the parents of that person, see if they know where the grandchild is. Check it out. Check before you act. Stop, take a deep breath, and check before you act on that information.
Yeah. So that kind of falls under the umbrella of fake emergencies.
Well, faith or trust. I mean, they're trusting that the person who says, "I'm your grandchild," "I'm in trouble." Those words, "I'm in trouble." You're not. You stop thinking clearly. You stop thinking, "Is that really?" And a number of consumers have told me, they really sounded just like my grandson or my granddaughter. They sounded just like them. And they even had their name correct. And so one of the things that tells me is that scammers, they put time and effort into building whatever the scam is that they're going to do. So maybe they're looking at Facebook postings, and then there's so much information about all of us out there, on the internet, on the dark web.
Yeah.
It's just out there. So the notion that you're going to be 100% anonymous is, that is not well-founded trust. So, but what scammers will do is they will do enough research that they will know, maybe the name of your grandchild, and they'll say, "Grandpa, it's Jim. Grandma, it's Mary." Um, but then they have the words, "I'm in trouble."
Right.
Those are the words that make people stop thinking clearly. And what I wanted to just mention one other related kind of scam that we've heard about a couple of times, and it's the scam where someone receives either a phone call or an email from the person that they believe is their boss saying, "I'm in a bind." Usually it's not, "I'm in jail, I'm hurt, I have a physical emergency of that sort," but "I'm in a bind. This task didn't get done. I'm tied up in meetings. Can you help me?" I've heard this from two different teachers who got what they thought was an email from their principal saying, "Oh, we're getting ready for this school project. This didn't get handled. Could you take care of this for me? Could you just go out and get this amount of gift cards, and I will make sure that, I will pay you back, but I'm tied up. I can't do it. Could you do it? And then call me." And they, put a phone number in there that is, the person maybe doesn't know that that's not their boss's real phone number, and call me, and we can get this taken care of.
You
So again, it's in a position of the employee wants to look good. They want to support the boss. They don't want to let them down. And especially in something like a school setting where so much information is now available on the internet about school staff, names of school staff, names of principals, names of teachers, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of information readily available for scammers to have access to.
You know, another thing now in terms of the sophistication of scammers and fraudsters is a year ago in DC, there was a conference on voice cloning. So that they're finding ways, if they can hear you speak, that they can clone your voice. And so that would tie right in with what you're talking about, Helen, that and we don't want to scare people here because this information is unnerving, and we realize that. But what we're trying to do is give you the tools to protect yourself. So please listen for advice and tips to protect yourself, because we're our own best friend when it comes to this situation.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so how about official science sounding titles and organizations that you've alluded to? I think Social Security and the Social Security card number, but what about other kinds of official organizations?
Well, we've noticed a lot in terms of investment fraud that scammers will um, have a bunch of initials, after their name that,
Yeah.
maybe, and it sounds like an impressive certification. Um, so a lot of those are made up. A lot of those don't really represent any substantive or meaningful educational attainment or expertise, but they sound good. And there actually are resources that a consumer could go to check out what the meaning is of those initials that are after a financial advisor or an investment advisor or a stockbroker or whatever. So there are some sites available to consumers to kind of explain that if you're getting a message from somebody who wants you to invest. But otherwise, there are a lot of times the scammers will use an agency name, or they will also invoke the names of other law enforcement or other examples to add veracity or to add some additional credence to their pitch.
I think the Secretary of State is a good place to check because they're supposed to all be registered. So our North Carolina Secretary of State would be one place. And then there's an organization, is it FINRA?
Yes, it is FINRA, Financial Industry Regulatory Agency, that has a lot of information on their website about titles and what it means and whether it's relevant and substantive or not.
Okay, and that's FINRA,
Uh, yes,
FINRA.
FINRA.
Okay, so people could Google that, and also the North Carolina Secretary of State.
Right. That's correct.
Okay, yeah, because people are supposed to be registered, and then there's the folks that just make up things. Now, I've heard about something about people getting rescammed. What's that about?
Well, rescamming or repeat victimization occurs because scammers compile lists of people who have various characteristics. And so one of the things that they have lists of are people who have been hooked on a previous scam. And so that sometimes I think the terms are offensive, but maybe it's called a mooch list, or maybe it's called the sucker list. But they're lists of people who have responded to a scam, and scammers sell that list. So there, there is a market for that information. And if, for example, it's not even if you've fallen for the scam, they sell lists of people who answer their telephone. They have lists of people who give money to all of those charitable solicitations. They have lists of all kinds of attributes that people have. And you know, they look for people that maybe would have an inclination to be responsive to their pitch.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of information is available in the public domain, but then you mentioned the dark web, and a lot of buying and selling of information goes on there. So it's a whole nother facet. Okay, so official sounding things. I was reading in the ARP magazine from a few months ago about calls that come from prisons. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I've heard that recently. In fact, there was a recent scam, and I'm blanking on the exact specifics of it, but there has been a scam being run out of a prison in California, and it even involved Scott Peterson, the person who has been convicted of killing his wife and his unborn child. Um, that he was involved in that scam, and I wish I could remember the specifics of it. But again, it was being run out of a penal institution. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I read the one in the ARP magazine is these two guys, they call up and they say whatever, and then they say, if you'd like to talk to my boss, here's his phone number. And so the boss picks up the phone and saying, I'm Sergeant so and so. It's amazing. And then how do the cell phones get into the prisons? They get smuggled in. So it's just a really amazing story.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're sort of winding down here, but I'm trying to see. You've got a lot of tips, and one of them certainly is report. And I always say report, shred, and share all this information that that you have found. Don't just throw it in the trash, because they're dumpster divers. But what about answering the phone from telephone numbers you don't recognize?
Well, my advice to consumers is to screen your calls. If a number pops up that you don't recognize, don't answer it. If it's a legitimate call, they'll leave a message and you can call them back. But I urge consumers not to call. And the other thing to remember is that phone numbers can easily be spoofed. Sometimes on my caller ID, I am told that I'm getting a call from myself. And it's my name and my phone number that pops up under caller ID.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of spoofing that can go on with caller ID, and so I'm at the point where I don't trust it, and so the advice there is to monitor your calls and don't answer calls from numbers that you don't recognize.
And
And
even if you do recognize, they're going to leave a message
yeah.
if it's legit. Hey, we got a comment here, or a question from Henry, and he asks, can the banks help? I guess this refers back to the man that withdrew $9,500. And he asks, can the banks help if they see a person withdraw a lot of money or send money out of the country? How can banks be helpful?
Well, there has been a good bit of work that has gone on with training staff in financial institutions to try to counsel consumers if they have a customer who comes in and they're taking out a lot of money and it is not their normal pattern.
Mhm.
to, that's a red flag, and to talk with the consumer about, um, what, without getting into their business too much, but to ask them some questions and to try to encourage them to, to not be doing this if they're under duress, or if it's in response to something that could be a scam. So there is some work going on there in that regard.
I think
Um,
I think my bank asks for a contact person just to have on file.
That is an important thing too. And yes, and that is a relatively new development with financial institutions, of having a contact on file, and that you are giving the bank permission to call that person if they suspect something, um, illegal or out of hand is going on.
Yeah, okay. How about those pesky things that come up on the computer? It could be your screen goes red, or something about your computer's at risk. What about those?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there are an awful lot of pop-up ads that or pop-up messages that can occur on your computer that will make it sound like your computer is about to melt down, or you're about to lose all the information on your computer, and just click on this link, and you can get help with this. So lots of times that it I would say probably 99% of the time, that is a scam. And please don't click on links, whether it's in a message on your computer, whether it's in an email that somebody has sent you. Don't click on links that come from people that you don't know, because they easily could, can be a scam. And the problem with the message that, oh, your computer's infected and it's about to melt down and you're going to lose everything and we can help you, is that in addition to giving over access to your computer, you click on the link, and somebody says, oh, yes, I can see here that your computer is badly infected and whatnot. Not only are they going to take over access to your computer and do something, but they can also easily install malware or spyware or something else that can be then capturing all of the information that you have on your computer. So the advice on that is that don't click on the link. If your computer is frozen, if you get this message that your computer is infected, please take your computer to a trusted professional who can check. Is it, do you have a problem? Has spyware been installed on it, or malware? Is there a problem there? But take it to someone that you trust, who can check out that situation. And the other thing that we're hearing is that consumers get all kinds of bills far, far, far in excess of what it normally would cost for somebody to have their computer checked, in the hundreds, if not the low thousands of dollars for that service. So if you're worried about your computer, take it to someone that you trust and to check it out for you.
So just turn it off.
Just turn it off.
Yeah,
Turn it off.
person that I know uh, got involved in one of these, and it was $1,200. And the thing that was really interesting, apparently it must have been with the camera, they said write a check and hold it up so we can see it. So they also could get her bank account information.
Yeah.
So then there's those pesky passwords that we all love. What do you do about passwords?
Well, the recommendation on passwords is to, number one, don't write them down and tape them to the side of your computer. Don't have them out visible in your house. Write them down and put them in a place where you can remember them, or use a password manager. Those services are available. Some of them are free, some of them are fairly low cost. A way to maintain a secure list of your passwords. And the other thing about passwords, and this is going to sound so elementary, but change your passwords, occasionally. Don't have the same password for your financial accounts that you set up, 20 some years ago, and you still have the same password for them. You need to change your accounts occasionally, and keep the information in a place that, number one, you remember what it is, and where it is and what it is, and that you can access it.
Yeah. Well, Helen, I know there's so much information out there and we could go on for a long time, but I think we need to kind of wrap this up. So do you have any just last minute things? And then I've got a couple of
Just
things.
just a couple. What I really want to remind people of is that government agencies like the IRS and the Social Security Administration are never going to telephone you if there's a problem with your tax return, if there's a problem with your Social Security account. So know that they're not going to telephone you. Point number two, never buy a gift card to pay a legitimate bill, or a bill that somebody tells you that you owe them. If you're going to buy gift cards, gift cards should be for friends and family, not for some person that you've never even laid eyes on before. So don't buy gift cards. And then the other thing that I would say, in terms of so many of these scams we've talked about today, where people's emotions get involved and they stop thinking really critically about the scenario and what they're doing, is if you get one of those scary phone calls or scary messages on your computer, the advice is stop, take a deep breath, and then check out the resources that are available to you in terms of legitimacy of that claim, or some other way that you can verify what you're being told.
Okay, thank you. And my thing is report, report, report. Let the Attorney General's office, depending what, if it's a investment thing, the Secretary of State, your local law enforcement, and AARP FraudWatch, because Helen and a number of other people are available to talk with people that have been scammed. We anticipate being back in January and February with more webinars, so watch for those. And Helen, thank you so very much. This was very, very rich conversation, and we so appreciate it. So we'll say goodbye to people, and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.